Hi, welcome to day 3 of 21 days to return to self-love. Today, what I want to talk about is that internal voice and how important it is that that voice is positive. You know, they say that we are our own worst critic, and I 100% believe that's true. And while that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing that we're our worst critic, I think it's great to have that check and balance and that self-awareness within us. It is a bad thing when it's negative. And so we want to make sure that our voice and the way that we speak to ourselves is positive. Unfortunately, more often than not, that voice is negative. So you may have heard, and I've heard several times people say to ask yourself, would I speak to a friend this way? Is this how I would speak to my best friend? More often than not, your answer is no. And so that serves as a good check for yourself. You may have also heard, and something that really helped me was to imagine yourself as a child who you love. Maybe it's a family member, a niece or a nephew, or your daughter. In my case, it's my niece, who I'm very close with. To ask myself, would I speak to her that way? And I have to say that really did help me a lot to start when I heard that negative self-talk, when I heard that voice inside that was negative. I would ask myself, would I speak to my niece this way? And it helped me to rephrase whatever it is, whatever that self-talk was. So that is an important, that's the process, right? To take whatever it is whatever that voice is in our head and whatever it is they're saying to us, not just to push it out and ignore it, but to actually transmute the negative to a positive. So that did help me in practice, thinking about myself as a child. But I'd like to share a different perspective on this. Since we're really thinking about self-love and hopefully getting to the point in as we go through this practice, getting to the point where we are our own best lover, I want to challenge you to take it a step further, and not just in how you would speak to a child, but also how you would speak to a lover who you're in love with, a lover who you're happy with, right? Not when you're upset and speaking out of your own personal trauma and baggage and things like that, but when you're speaking out of love. So this practice is pretty simple in that. There's a woman who I follow. I love her content. I love her talks. Teal Swan. She's this very enlightened human and speaks a lot on this topic of self-love. And one of the things that she does, one of her tools that she uses both with herself and clients, is she asks a question. When you're about to make a decision and you're not sure what to do, ask yourself the question, is what would someone who loves themselves do? So, and I love that. What would someone who loves themselves do? And what I love the question. I think it's great. I think it's very, it can definitely point you in a direction. For someone who doesn't love themselves and has no concept of that, it can be a little bit confusing. Well, I don't know. So we're going to apply that question to how we speak to ourselves. What would someone who loves themselves say to themselves? How would someone who loves themselves speak to themselves? So let's rephrase the question. How would I want my lover to speak to me about this? How would I want to, what words would I want to hear? What tone would I want to hear from a lover about this? If I'm loving myself, if I'm truly loving myself, then how would I want a lover to speak to myself? Let's change it and let's take it a step further. Let's add that element of intimacy that you only have with love. Okay, so we're going to add this level of intimacy. We're going to start asking ourselves, how would I want a lover to speak to me about this? So that we're adding this gate, right? A gatekeeper. That when we hear that negative self-talk, now we're going to stop it at the gate. And we're going to say, hold on. How would I want a lover to speak to me? How would someone who loves themselves speak to themselves? Word it in whatever way makes sense for yourself. This needs to be authentic. It needs to be your own voice. So we're just adding a boundary. We're adding for ourselves, right? We are responsible for maintaining a positive environment for ourselves. And a lot of us know how to do that with the external things around us, right? You know that negative person that you don't like being around, that you just don't hang out with. Well, what about when the negative person is that internal voice? Let's figure out a way, let's have this check, this gatekeeper, to reprogram that inner voice so that we can start being that positive note, that positive voice of encouragement and love and acceptance and grace. So that's the practice. It's very simple. I want you to either write out on a post-it note and put it on your mirror where you see it in the morning, or put it on your phone. Have it be like the screensaver on your phone so that you see it consistently. Write out the question in whatever way feels right to you. How would someone who loved themselves speak to themselves? How would I want a lover to speak to me? Whatever makes sense to you. And then revisit it. Okay, so you're going to see it constantly. In practice, what this really looks like is, again, we're transmuting. So when that negative comes in, it's not that just we've created only a gatekeeper. Let's think about this differently. So instead of a gatekeeper where I'm just going to stop it and say, nope, you don't get to come in, there's that voice for a reason. Something is going on. So rather than just stopping them at the gate, we're going to act almost as like a converter, right? When you convert something to something else, right? We're going to act as a converter. We're going to transmute that negativity into something positive. So this phrase, instead of acting as this boundary and gatekeeper that doesn't let anything in, is going to instead act as a converter. So I want you to imagine it and picture it in that way. This was really helpful to me. It may sound funny, but to the point where I have reprogrammed that inner voice. Not that nothing negative ever gets through. Absolutely, I'm a human. Negativity gets through, for sure. But I've reprogrammed that inner voice enough that my inner voice speaks to me like a lover would. Sometimes I hear, hey, love, it's okay. You didn't do this today. You had a rough day. You can get to it tomorrow. Or, hey, baby, great job on this and this and this, or whatever it is. Like, my inner voice speaks to me like a lover would. And it is so filling. It's been, again, it was a journey and it takes a lot of practice. But I encourage you to play around with that as you're consciously converting that negative self-talk to something that's more positive. Play around with that and see what happens. That transmutation of negative to positive is so powerful and so huge in our journey to loving ourselves. So again, the practice for today is very, very simple. All I want you to do is write somewhere where you're going to see it as a reminder, a phrase, your own version of that phrase. How would someone who loves themselves speak to themselves? Is this how I would want a lover to speak to me? Whatever version of that makes sense to you and sounds right. Write that out so you can see it, and then hopefully it's a reminder of this conversion, right, that we've created for ourselves. Not a boundary, not a gate. This conversion that we've created ourselves to transmute that negative self-talk to positive self-talk. That's it for today. Once you do that, you've completed day 3 of 21 days to return to self-love. Thank you for being here. I'll see you tomorrow.